Five Nights at Freddy's is almost 12 years old and has had an amazing run. It's my favorite series, but despite that, the state of the franchise today has me quite worried. There are so many issues, from disappointing releases to unclear communication, a serious lack of quality control, and a plethora of cancelled games. As a diehard FNAF fan, it hurts to see the current state of the series. So today I want to discuss the issues with modern FNAF and maybe how to fix this beloved franchise. What got me to make this video was the recent reveals of possibly cancelled games and the whole situation surrounding 5 Laps at Freddy's. This racing spin-off game developed by Click Team was revealed in 2024 along with a demo, but there's been very little news about it since then. Recently, a Patreon post from the game's composer, Sam Dillard, resurfaced, and it claimed that the game was cancelled. This shocked many fans. However, Sam Dillard later confirmed that the game is still in development in some form. But I believe this says a lot about the series. We've received almost no news or clarification over the state of 5 Laps at Freddy's. And this isn't the only game with an unclear status. FNAF has an abundance of spin-off projects in development, most of which are either cancelled or have vanished. We've seen some artwork for cancelled spin-off games, and a former Click Team developer recently posted images of an unknown 3D project. This is likely the same one that Click Team showed off in Halloween of 2023, judging by the visuals. The fact that this was teased almost 3 years ago and we still have no clue what it is or if it's still in development is pretty concerning. There's also another teaser for a game found a couple of years back. I'm not sure if this is the same game or another entry, but still, the lack of communication surrounding these games is worrying. This isn't how a big series should handle itself. FNAF has the resources to make all of these projects, or at least be clear about their status. But we've received little to no word on any of these, leaving many fans confused as to whether or not they're still in development or quietly cancelled. However, I have no clue what's going on behind the scenes, and these projects weren't just cancelled on a whim. I am well aware that stuff happens, that's just life. But at the same time, the sheer amount of cancelled or possibly cancelled projects is concerning. Again, I get that game development is messy and things could have happened behind the scenes that we don't know about. But even then, the vague status of these projects is so frustrating sometimes, especially since they were previously teased and made known to fans. There were also some recent leaks for some more possible Click Team projects, but since they weren't officially revealed, I won't be discussing them here. Granted, having scrap projects isn't a major red flag, every series has those. But the fact that there's just so much content in the works that's tossed aside is sad. Again, I have zero clue what's going on behind the scenes, but I wish it had been handled better. If games are cancelled early into development or before the fanbase is aware of their existence, then I think that's more acceptable. But a good chunk of these were canned or abandoned long after fans were made aware of their existence, which makes it all the more disappointing. And in case you're unaware, FNAF does have an official news account, one with the gold checkmark. So this would be a perfect way to promote the series and clear up confusions such as these. However, as of writing this video, the account has been dormant since November of 2025. For such a big series to have an official news account that doesn't actually promote the series is really upsetting. It didn't even post for the release of Secret of the Mimic or Five Nights at Freddy's 2. I know Stewell and Blumhouse promoted those on their socials, but I still believe the official FNAF account should acknowledge the series' new releases. FNAF is such a popular, profitable series, and it needs to use that power to help itself, whether it be clearing up the state of projects or promoting new games, movies, books, and merch. Johnny Blocks, for example, runs a really good FNAF news account that covers all these topics and is very informative. The FNAF fanverse also has its own Twitter that reports on pretty much everything those games do. I find this to be much more beneficial than the official FNAF Twitter account. Again, this is a very big series with a lot of money, so I don't see why it can't use that to better promote itself. The Bendy Twitter account does a great job at this, even with a much smaller influence. We need a better source of FNAF news like these accounts to help the series, especially since there's no official website or source for all things FNAF, making it hard to keep up with the series. Marketing has been a big issue for Five Nights at Freddy's for a long time. Ruin's release date wasn't announced until the same month it was released, and Help Wanted 2's release date was announced in a PlayStation blog instead of a trailer, less than a month before its launch. Despite Secret of the Mimic being a major FNAF game, it received only one gameplay trailer and a handful of teasers, most of which were just in-game posters that didn't create much hype, although I will say that the MCM commercials were good. It also got Help Wanted 2 update to promote the game, but outside of that, the overall marketing was scarce and uninteresting. Posting teasers is one thing, but posting teasers that create interest and get people talking is another. And while Secret of the Mimic did post a fair amount of teasers, none of them felt like anything worthwhile. I believe that a broader marketing campaign similar to Security Breach would have been a better way to promote Help Wanted 2 and Secret of the Mimic. The overall lack of marketing could definitely be hurting the series, so I hope that picks up. It also seems like Click Team is limited in what they can say about their projects. As when responding to a Twitter comment asking about 5 Laps at Freddy's, they said, "When we are allowed to share news, we will. This might be a stretch, but some people think this means that Scott Cawthon is also controlling what the people he works with can say. Now, I'm not saying I agree with this, but it could explain the lack of marketing throughout FNAF's projects. But outside of Scott being very controlling of FNAF, there's not too much proof of this claim. On that note, I do think that Scott Cawthon's management is a big issue with the series. Just to be clear, this isn't a personal attack on him. Five Nights at Freddy's means the world to me, so I know I hate Scott Cawthon or his work. However, I feel like sometimes this controlling nature holds FNAF back. I think a creator having control over their creation is an amazing thing. A lot of series end up in the hands of other people and suffer because of that. And as a creator myself, I believe people should be entitled to owning and controlling what they've worked hard to create. However, Scott Cawthon seems to be very protective and controlling of the brand, and it sometimes limits the series. I think a great example of this is the Week Before graphic novel. This adaptation of the first interactive book was pitched by Katie Reiser, but was rejected. According to Katie, Scott just didn't want to adapt the graphic novel because he was busy. Again, I commend Scott for trying to manage the series himself, but the fact that it seems like everything has to go through him holds FNAF back. I don't think anything should have to be overlooked just because he's busy. For such a big series, that's a bit disappointing. I wouldn't be surprised if this is the reason why we haven't gotten new FNAF content Dead by Daylight since October. I believe that Scott wanting to handle and to prove everything is commendable, but at the same time, it appears that makes us miss out on content such as the Week Before graphic novel and who knows what else. I think it'd be better if Scott had a team of people with a set of values or standards that he wants to hold the FNAF franchise to, and they could help him manage and improve content, ensuring that we don't miss out on projects just because Scott is too busy. I also want to discuss Scott's values and what he believes fits FNAF, because sometimes I don't exactly understand his logic, and I think it limits the fun products that we can have. Dead by Daylight's game director, Matthew Cote, reported that he heard some licensors relay something that Scott had told them.
He told us that if you want your property treated right, you go with behavior. You go to Dead by Daylight. There are other games out there. Some people will throw a lot of money at you to be in their game. We all know who we're talking about. No, just go on Dead by Daylight. And to me, that was the biggest possible seal of approval that we could have gotten for this. It means that not only was it worthy of like the fans that worship this property, but the creator, who is extremely protective of his baby, as he should be, was like, he was praising us for how we respected it and we managed to create something that was worthy of representing it.
Scott appears to be very particular about FNAF's collaborations, so we'll probably never see FNAF in something like Fortnite, for example. However, FNAF has had a long history of crazy spin-offs, and we can even see that to this day with some of the cancelled projects and 5 Laps at Freddy's. The series was also featured in Funko Fusion, so I'm not sure why Scott seems particular about collabs, while at the same time allowing that. Five Nights at Freddy's has a pretty significant goofy side, making the decision to limit its collaborations even stranger. I could understand Scott's preferences to keep the FNAF collabs accurate to the series if he were at least consistent with it, but it seems like he shoots down collabs that people actually want while also developing weird spin-offs that no one asked for. I hate to sound like an entitled fan because again, I think creators should have control of their creations. Fans aren't entitled to getting their way. Creators should be able to tell their stories and do what they want. But at the same time, it feels like Scott Cawthon's values for FNAF are inconsistent, and he's so controlling to the point that we don't get anything good or fun because of it. That being said, when he did collaborate with Dead by Daylight, it was amazing. Springtrap was a great addition to the game, and it was probably the best depiction of his character so far. So I will say that when Scott does collaborate, it's great. I just think that seeing more heavily requested collabs could be nice, or at the very least, keeping FNAF's values more consistent. Speaking of which, I think some of the recent FNAF releases have been hit or miss. While Into the Pit and Secret of the Mimic were amazing games that brought the series back to its horror roots, everything afterwards has been a slippery slope, most notably the FNAF 2 movie and Secret of the Mimic VR. I reviewed Five Nights at Freddy's 2, and I still stand by my opinion that it's a fun movie, but man, is the writing a letdown. I wrote a college final on the film, and I found myself really enjoying its themes. Vanessa, Michael, and Charlotte are all different outcomes of child abuse or neglect, but the film never really engages with these themes or even acknowledges them for a good chunk of the film. Henry and Charlie's relationship is basically the entire driving force of the marionette, but he hardly shows up or gets any focus. The movie relies too much on fan service rather than an actual story. And don't get me wrong, as a fan I was indeed serviced, but I'd much rather have a solid story. Take the Amazing Backrooms movie for example. It's part of a wider YouTube series, but doesn't feel the need to reference it all that much, and when it does, it fits with the story and doesn't feel jarring. It tells a straightforward story that anyone can understand, regardless of how familiar they are with the source material. FNAF 2 was clearly meant to be enjoyed by fans, and while I think that's important when adapting a game, I still believe it should have had a good story that anyone could appreciate. Moving on, Secret of the Mimic VR was an absolute mess, which is a shame because it's something I was really excited for. Steelwool Studios always excels when they focus on VR. I consider Help Wanted and its sequel to be some of the best FNAF games. However, there were all sorts of issues with this VR port. First off, Steelwool waited until it launched to clarify that it wouldn't release on PC at the same time, which left many fans disappointed. Then, when PSVR 2 users actually got to play it, it was messy. I was one of those people who played on launch day, and while it wasn't unplayable, it was far from perfect. The interactions were janky, the visuals could have been better, and overall, there were so many bugs that I guarantee someone had to have noticed. On release day, Steelwool Studios even made a post about the bugs they plan to fix in the future, so they seem to know that the port was rough. My issue isn't that there were bugs, it's that everyone involved was clearly aware of them and didn't delay the port to fix it. The questionable quality of this seems to be because it was outsourced to devoted studios, likely so Steelwool could focus on the next FNAF game. I think it's really disappointing how they didn't handle Secret of the Mimic VR themselves, as virtual reality is their bread and butter. The botch release also somehow broke the game's flat mode, causing bugs and messing up the visuals. At the time of writing this video, these issues still haven't been fixed, although VR mode is a bit more stable. This is the first time I've actually started to worry about FNAF. Secret of the Mimic's VR release was a bad mix of no communication, plus a clearly unstable release that sadly reminds me of Security Breach's launch. This is especially upsetting after Help Wanted 2 and Secret of the Mimic had very solid releases. I encountered little to no bugs when I played those games, and I can't say the same for this VR port. While things might seem bleak, I want to highlight the areas where I think the series is doing great. Despite the mess that was Secret of the Mimic VR, Steelwool Studios has promised to be better at communicating with fans, and so far, they've done a pretty good job of being more transparent. Something else I appreciate is that Steelwool has been doing much more advertising for the game with cinematic trailers and posts, which I think are leagues better than the pre-release marketing. Secret of the Mimic's bigger focus on horror and storytelling is also something that has me very confident in their future games. Another great thing is that FNAF's art seems to be receiving a higher level of quality control. The Amazing Snartles has been making a lot of artwork for the series, including books, merch, the FNAF 2 movie, and Halloween Horror Nights. Additionally, after the Mimic graphic novel was leaked and heavily criticized, the book was delayed and Mike Anderson redrew that story with better visuals. So clearly, Five Nights at Freddy's artwork is getting much more care put into it, and so far it's definitely paying off. Another highlight of modern FNAF is the Fazbear Fanverse initiative, which works with fan game developers to release their games as part of the franchise officially. This had a pretty rocky start, but I find it to be one of the best parts of FNAF. POPGOES Arcade is one of my favorite games in the series, My POPGOES is a fun minigame collection, FNAF 4 and Fur look promising, and the deluxe versions of the Candies trilogy are very exciting. But what stands above them all is the joy of creation, an official reboot of the beloved fan game. I love the original game, and this version is already one of the best FNAF entries in my opinion. It's exactly what I wish Five Nights at Freddy's was, a gritty horror game with tense gameplay. The Office demo on Steam is amazing. The gameplay loop is good, and the animatronics are brutal, making them actually feel threatening. And on top of that, the joy of creation is a stunning looking game. This is definitely the best FNAF has ever looked, and it has some crazy, surreal visuals and effects. All the teasers for the other levels look amazing. I can't wait for this game. Oh, and speaking of teasers, the Joy of Creation has a lot of those, unlike a majority of FNAF's recent projects. The POPGOES series receives updates much more frequently too. The fanverse might have had a rough start, and some of the entries likely won't be out for a while, but everything that has been released is amazing, and the frequent marketing makes the future even more exciting. So while things might seem rough, it's always important to remember that there are good parts of FNAF, and that's worth holding on to. The fanverse has helped me continue loving the series, even as things seem bleak. If we want things to get better, then you need to share your thoughts and voice. For whatever faults FNAF has, its creators are great at listening to feedback. Scott and Steelwool Studios absolutely took Security Breach's criticism to heart, and that shows in their later work. So please, calmly and kindly share your thoughts online. Will that help? I'm not sure. I doubt this video will make any difference, but we can always hope that things will get better. I'm sure that 2027 will be another packed year for Five Nights at Freddy's, so we can at least look forward to that. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and join our Patreon and YouTube monthly memberships. Special thanks to our current members listed on screen. We appreciate your support. Please consider becoming a member yourself. It helps us continue making videos like this one, and both memberships have a range of cool perks including shoutouts, early access to ad-free videos, custom emojis, badges next to your name, exclusive previews of upcoming projects, and more. Thanks for watching, and be sure to check out our other videos.